Some people do not say much to God until the envelope is too thick to ignore. Before we begin, tell me this in the comments. If saving the farm meant risking your mother's last piece of land, would you sign the paper or let the farm go? Because on a cold Monday in Dent County, Missouri, Jonah Bell stood in his mudroom with a foreclosure notice in one hand and his father's pocket knife in the other. By the time that notice ran its course, his mother would leave the only house she had slept in for 43 years, his sister would stop speaking to him, and his son would swear he was done with farming for good. And the hardest part was this: the land did not go because Jonah was lazy. It went because pride can sound a lot like hope when a man is tired, ashamed, and sure one more season will fix what 3 bad ones already broke. This is the story of the Bell farm, the note Jonah thought he could carry, and the day the bank decided numbers mattered more than blood. The Bell place sat 15 miles outside Salem, at the end of a county road that narrowed into gravel and then into habit. 312 acres in all. Some of it was ridge pasture with thin grass and stubborn rock. Some of it was bottom ground that made decent hay in a generous year. There was an old red barn leaning just enough to worry strangers, a machine shed patched with mismatched tin, and a white farmhouse that had settled into the earth the way old people settle into silence. Jonah lived there with his wife, Elise, their 17-year-old son Micah, and their 12-year-old daughter June. His mother, Ruth Bell, lived in the room off the kitchen after his father, Vernon, died of a stroke 2 years earlier. Jonah's younger sister, Cara, lived in Rolla with her husband and 2 little boys, but her name still sat on part of the paperwork because Vernon had never cleaned up the estate the way he should have. Bell men had always measured life in things outsiders missed, whether the first cutting smelled sweet enough to stack without heating, whether the cows bunched before rain, whether the old Massey would start clean or cough blue, whether the mailbox held seed catalogs, tax bills, or something worse. Most mornings Jonah was up before light. He would pull on chore boots in the dark, pour yesterday's coffee back into a pan to heat it, and step out into a yard marked by feed buckets, boot prints, and the kind of cold that made even the gate chains sound brittle. Micah usually met him at the lot before school. June fed bottle calves when there were any. Elise packed lunches, kept the house moving, and stretched groceries with a skill that never got called what it really was: labor under pressure. Ruth was the one who still remembered the farm before Dad had a name. Back when Vernon's father milked a few cows by hand, when the creek ran steadier, when neighbors borrowed equipment with a handshake and returned it with pie or diesel. She kept a Bible on the kitchen shelf, though these days it sat under a stack of sale bills, school papers, and a pair of reading glasses that always seemed to be missing when she needed them. The Bells were not poor in the way television understands poor. They had land under their boots, a freezer with beef, a truck that still ran, and enough machinery to look respectable from the road. But people who have never carried an operating note do not understand how a family can sit on hundreds of acres and still feel one envelope away from panic. And by the winter this story begins, panic had already moved in. It just had not started speaking out loud yet. The trouble had not begun with one disaster. That would have been easier to explain. It started with 2 dry summers in 3 years. The first one burned the pasture down early and forced Jonah to buy hay in July, which was like paying hospital prices for bread. The second one came after he had already promised himself the first had been bad luck. Calves came in lighter. Fertilizer cost more. Diesel refused to come back down. Repair bills stopped being surprises and became part of the calendar. Then interest rates moved. When Vernon was still alive, he had carried debt the old way, small enough to deny, steady enough to survive, and mostly with the same local bank branch that had known the Bells for decades. But after Vernon died, probate dragged, feed costs rose, and Jonah consolidated more than he should have. He rolled the cattle note, 2 equipment balances, and part of the estate expenses into one larger variable rate package because the payment looked manageable at the start. Manageable is a dangerous word in farming. It means survivable only if weather, markets, machinery, health, and timing all agree not to betray you in the same year. They did. The baler gearbox failed in June. A cow got in a bad wire and needed the vet. Micah needed tires for the truck he drove to school and work. June needed braces they postponed twice. Elise's old washing machine quit and started leaking brown water across the laundry room floor. Every one of those problems would have been normal by itself. Together, they became the kind of ordinary pressure that breaks a family before anybody dares call it breaking. Jonah started sorting the mail before anybody else woke up. He slid late notices under the truck seat. He told Elise the feed store would wait another month. He told Ruth the bank meeting was just paperwork. He told Cara the estate buyout would make more sense after calf prices improved. He told himself spring would straighten everything out. At the gas station and the livestock barn, people had started noticing how long the Bells were taking to sell calves, how often Jonah patched old equipment instead of replacing it, how carefully he counted feed sacks before loading them. In the country, gossip does not need cruelty to do damage. Sometimes it only needs accuracy and a coffee pot. One morning at Harlan's Cafe, a man 2 stools down said, "Not quiet enough. Bell's trying to farm 2026 with 1998 iron and 1988 money." Another one laughed and answered, "No, Bell's trying to farm on prayer and pride." Jonah heard it. So did the waitress. So did 2 men who looked down into their eggs because they knew what public shame feels like in a county where everybody knows your gate. He did not say a word. He paid for his coffee and left. But when a man says nothing in a moment like that, it does not mean the words missed him. It means they landed somewhere deeper. That night, after supper, after June went to bed, and Micah slammed the screen door on his way out to check mineral tubs, Jonah stood alone at the kitchen sink with both hands on the counter and stared into the dark over the yard light. Ruth was at the table folding dish towels. She did not turn around when she asked, "How bad is it?" Jonah took too long to answer. She looked up then, not angry, just old enough to know silence is weight. He said, "Bad enough." Ruth nodded once. She did not give him a sermon. She did not quote a verse. She only reached for the little Bible under the school papers, rested her hand on it, and said, "Your daddy used to wait too long to tell the truth too." Jonah swallowed hard and looked back out the window. A few minutes later, with the kitchen quiet and the refrigerator humming like something alive, he said the closest thing to a prayer he had managed in months. "Lord, if this place is going to go, don't let me lie to the people I love while it does." It was not a brave prayer. It was not even a hopeful one, but it was honest. 3 days later, Jonah drove to the bank in Salem wearing a clean pearl snap shirt that felt like a costume. The branch manager, Nolan Price, was younger than Jonah by at least 5 years and had the careful voice of a man trained to say hard things without leaving fingerprints on them. They sat in a glass office with a fake plant, a framed picture of a barn somebody had bought from a catalog, and a printout of numbers Jonah already knew were bad. Nolan tapped the page and said, "Your debt service coverage isn't there. Not with the current cash flow, not with the carryover balance, and not with rates where they are now." Jonah leaned forward. "If I can get to first cutting and move the feeder calves after that, I can catch part of it up." Nolan gave him the look bankers give when they are done discussing weather as if it were a business plan. Hope is not a restructure. The bank would consider renewing the note, he said, but only under new terms. A Additional collateral. Immediate reduction in principal. Full disclosure on the estate. No more rolling unpaid operating costs forward without support. If Jonah wanted time, time was now expensive. Then Nolan slid the worst page across the desk. The bank wanted Ruth's 80-acre timber tract, the only piece still free and clear, tied into the new collateral package. Jonah stared at the line where his mother's land had become a bargaining chip. He said, "That's her security." Nolan answered, "It's also available equity." That is how institutions speak when they are about to rename a person's last comfort as an asset. There was more. Because Vernon's estate was still not fully settled, Kara would need to sign a waiver delaying petition. If she refused, the title complication alone could trigger default action under the current review. Jonah went cold in the chest. So this was not just about money anymore. It was about asking his mother to risk the only land the bank could not yet touch, and asking his sister to postpone her share again while trusting the brother who had not told her how close the walls already were. He left the meeting with a folder tucked under his arm so tightly the edges bent. By the time he got to the truck, the branch had already made its decision in spirit, even if the paperwork still pretended otherwise. A week later, his loan was moved out of local handling and into the bank's special assets department in Springfield. That was the day Jonah understood what being written off really meant. Not yelled at, not warned, not rescued. Just moved. Moved out of relationship and into procedure. And in a small farm county, word spread fast that the bank had quit dealing with Jonah Bell like he was coming back. That was when the laughing got easier for some people. Jonah should have told the family everything that same night. He did not. Instead, he came home, set the folder on the counter, and said the bank wanted some additional signatures. Elise looked at him a long moment and asked, "What are you not saying?" He told her they would talk after chores tomorrow. Tomorrow became 4 more tomorrows. Elise found the truth the way spouses usually do in farm families, not through confession, but through paper. She was looking for June's school insurance form in the truck and found the bank packet under the seat, folded beside 3 past-due feed invoices and a red notice from the equipment lender. She laid every piece of it on the kitchen table after supper. Ruth read the collateral page once, then set it down very carefully like it might explode if handled honestly. Kara happened to be there that evening because she had driven out to ask, for the 3rd time in 6 months, whether the estate was ever going to be settled. Her husband, Travis, had been laid off from the cabinet plant. Their oldest boy needed asthma medication that kept getting pricier. She had not come to be cruel. She had come because desperation wears different clothes in town than it does on a farm, but it still knocks the same way. When she saw her own name on the waiver page, she looked at Jonah as if he had become somebody else while she was driving over. "You were going to ask me to sign this," she said. "I was going to explain it first." "When?" Elise asked, "After your mother signed away the last safe ground on this place." Jonah's face hardened. "Nobody's signing anything away." Ruth's voice was calm enough to hurt. "Then why's my land in the folder?" That was the moment his defense rose up stronger than his honesty. He talked too fast. He said rates had blindsided everybody. He said the bank was overreacting. He said one decent season could still save it. He said people who did not work the place every day did not understand what selling now would mean. Kara stood up from the table, so fast her chair caught on the linoleum. "Do not talk to me like I'm some outsider," she said. "That land was my dad's too." Jonah shot back. "And where were you the last 10 years when the fences needed fixing and the roof on the calving shed had to be patched?" Kara's eyes filled immediately, which made him angrier because somewhere inside he knew he had chosen the cheapest possible blow. I was raising my boys and paying my own bills, she said. And not once did I ask you for a dime. But now you want me to trust paperwork you hid under a truck seat. Micah had been standing in the doorway through all of it, not moving. June was crying in the hall. Elise walked her to the bedroom and came back with the look of a woman deciding whether grief still counts as love. Then Ruth said the sentence that split the room open. Your father told me, if anything ever happened, never let that 80 go on a note. Nobody spoke for a second. Jonah turned toward her slowly. You never told me that. You never asked me what he was afraid of, Ruth answered. That line stayed in the house like smoke. Elise finally looked Jonah dead in the face and said, You are not trying to save the farm anymore. You're trying to save your pride in front of a county that already knows. There are insults a man can shrug off. There are truths that feel like insults because they arrive too late to be useful. Jonah slammed his palm on the table so hard the silverware jumped. June cried out from the bedroom. Micah stepped forward for the first time all night. Dad, he said low and shaking, stop. But the damage was already doing what damage does best. It was making everybody choose a side before anybody had a plan. The next month was what losing looks like before the sale bill is printed. Jonah sold 12 bred cows he had planned to keep. He listed the dozer that had belonged to Vernon. He took weekend hauling work with a gravel outfit 2 counties over and came home too tired to talk. Elise picked up extra shifts in the cafeteria and started clipping coupons with the kind of concentration people usually save for prayer. Micah quit talking about baseball and started welding after school in a shop outside town. He still did chores. He still loaded hay, but something had changed in his face. Boys look at a farm one way when they believe it will be theirs, and another way when they learn it might only be something they watch disappear. Jonah swallowed enough pride to meet Kara at a diner in Rolla and apologize. He told her the real number then, the whole number. Not just the banknote, but the feed store balance, the equipment arrears, the property taxes he had paid late twice, and the legal costs still hanging over the estate. Kara cried quietly and did not wipe her face because she was too tired to be embarrassed in public. Then she said something he had not allowed himself to consider. If I sign that waiver and Mama signs the 80 and you still lose it, we all go down together. Jonah did not answer because he could not. A week later, Ruth made her own decision. She would not pledge the 80. She did not say it dramatically. She said it while peeling potatoes. I love you, she told Jonah, but I will not put the last clean ground your father left me under a bank. He stared at the table and nodded once. Then he went outside and stood in the machine shed, so long Elise had to come get him. Some help came. Country people do still help each other, but help is not the same thing as rescue. A church outside Viburnum sent 2 trailer loads of hay. A neighbor let Jonah use a mower conditioner after his broke. One old man handed him $500 at the sale barn and said, You can pay me back when breathing costs less. But grace cannot always outrun math. Spring rains came late, and then all at once, too hard to soak right. One cutting got rained on. Another came thin. Calf prices softened exactly when Jonah needed them strongest. The bank rejected his revised cash flow plan in 11 businesslike sentences. Then Kara filed a legal request to force estate action before the debt swallowed what little value was left. She did it crying. She did it after warning him she might. She did it because her own family was sinking and she no longer believed waiting was kindness. That is one of the cruel truths about hardship. It can make decent people hurt each other while trying not to drown. When Jonah was served the papers, he did not curse. He just sat on the back step at dusk and looked out over the lower pasture until it was too dark to see fence lines. Elise sat down beside him after a while. For several minutes, neither of them said anything. Then Jonah asked, "Do you think I ruined us?" Elise did not answer quickly. Finally, she said, "I think you kept trying to carry alone what should have been spoken early." That was gentler than he deserved, and because of that it hurt more. The final notice came in October. Not a threat this time, not a warning, not a meeting request. A sale date. Equipment first, then cattle, then real estate if deficiency remained and settlement terms were not met before the deadline. The sheriff's posting went up at the courthouse. A printed copy appeared on the feed store board before noon. By supper, half the county knew. Jonah did what desperate men do when dignity becomes negotiable. He tried to sell privately. He called a cattle buyer in West Plains. He called a cousin in Arkansas about the hay ground. He even spoke to a man from Springfield who wanted the place not to farm, but to carve into hunting tracks and weekend cabins. For 2 days, Jonah considered taking that deal just to stop the auction and spare Ruth the sight of strangers pricing her life by the acre. But the offer came in low, and the attorney's letter made it plain that with liens, interest, and estate complications, low was no longer enough. Auction morning came cold and bright after a night of hard wind. People started pulling in early, coffee in thermoses, hands in coat pockets, voices lowered not out of respect, but out of appetite. Auctions draw more than bidders. They draw witnesses. People come to buy, to measure, to remember, to compare, and sometimes just to reassure themselves that it is not their name on the sale bill. Ruth would not get out of the truck at first. Elise sat with her. June cried quietly because she had never seen grown people look at their own house like visitors. Micah stayed by the barn with his jaw set so hard he looked older than Jonah. The auctioneer started with tools, gates, trailers, small things first. Then the tractors. Vernon's dozer sold to a man Jonah did not know. The old cattle panels went for less than they were worth. A neighbor bought the squeeze chute and looked ashamed while doing it. Every sold item sounded like a little sentence ending. Then came the cattle. Then came the land. Parcel 1 was the South Hay Field. Parcel 2 was the ridge pasture. Parcel 3 included the house, the barn, and a lot where Ruth had hung laundry for 40 years. Bidding moved fast at first, and then in ugly little pauses. A local family tried, so did a cattleman from the next county. But the winning number came from a partnership out of St. Louis investing in recreational ground and long-hold acreage. Just like that, the Bell place stopped belonging to the Bells. No thunder rolled. No miracle interrupted. No banker stood up and found his conscience. The clerk wrote down the number. The auctioneer said sold. Somebody in the back coughed. Somebody else checked his phone. Jonah did not cry there. Ruth did. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just one hand over her mouth and a sound so small it made Elise close her eyes. Micah walked away before the last paperwork was signed. He kept walking past the barn, past the lot, past the lane, until Jonah lost sight of him. That evening, after the trucks were gone and the yard looked stripped even before moving day, Micah came back long enough to say one sentence. "I'm not raising my kids on a promise that can be taken by mail." Then he went to the shop, packed a duffel, and left for a friend's place in town. That was the moment Jonah understood the title of his own loss. It was never only land. It was trust. It was inheritance. It was a story a boy had believed about what hard work could keep. The family had 30 days to clear the house. Ruth took the kitchen table, Vernon's chair, her dish towels, and one coffee can of dirt from the garden she had kept behind the porch steps for years. She moved into a 2-bedroom rental in town with windows that looked onto a parking lot instead of pasture. The first week there, she kept waking before daylight and reaching for chores that no longer belonged to her. Elise boxed up years in silence. School pictures, vet bills, church bulletins tucked into cookbooks, a pair of June's baby shoes found in the back of a dresser. Ordinary things become unbearable when you have to decide whether they are worth room in a smaller life. Micah never moved back to the farm because there was no farm to move back to. He took full-time welding work in Springfield, finished school from there, and started speaking about the Bell place in the past tense before anybody else could bear to. Kara got a settlement once the estate dust finally settled and liens were paid, but it was far less than outsiders would imagine when they hear acreage. She used most of it to catch up medical bills, replace the transmission in Travis's truck, and pay off the lawyer she had hired because she no longer trusted family promises to count as plans. She and Jonah did not speak for 5 months. When they finally did, it was at Ruth's doctor appointment in town, where both of them reached for the same clipboard and then stood there looking older than they should have. Kara said, "I never wanted it like this." Jonah answered, "I know." Some apologies arrive after the damage, because that is when people finally stop defending themselves long enough to see clearly. Jonah and Elise stayed married, but losing the farm changed the shape of their home even after the home was gone. He talked less. She carried more. Some nights he drove the old county road and parked where he could see the top of the barn roof over the trees, though it was no longer his to approach. He did that until the new owners painted over the Bell name on the gate and posted a sign about private hunting access. That was the first night he came home shaking. The low-faith prayer he had spoken at the sink had been answered, though not the way he would have chosen. He had not lied all the way to the end. The truth had come out, but truth, once delayed, had still cost everybody. Ruth said something near Christmas that none of them forgot. They were eating chili in the rental, paper snowflakes taped to the window by June, traffic noise where cattle sounds ought to have been. Ruth looked around the little table and said, "The Lord did not keep the farm. He kept us at the table." Nobody answered for a while, because even that felt fragile. Because some losses do not turn golden just because a family survives them. Because sometimes the only mercy left is that grief did not get the final word over love. But the land was gone. The Bell place was gone. And the family that came through it was not the same family that entered. That is the part people in coffee shops do not laugh about later. They laugh when a man looks proud. They get quiet when they learn what pride was hiding. If this story hit you anywhere close to home, tell me this in the comments. Was Jonah wrong the moment he hid the debt, or the moment he tried to save the farm after he knew the truth? And if you have ever watched land, inheritance, family, or pride pull people apart, I want to hear where you stand. Because out in the country, people say losing a farm is about weather, prices, or banks. But sometimes it is also about silence. Sometimes it is about shame. And sometimes faith does not save the ground. Sometimes it only keeps what is left of the family from disappearing with it.